Today, we're going to talk about something that's, well, fundamental to our entire economy. It's all about the power of the consumer. So, let me ask you something. What do you think is the most powerful force in the American economy? I mean, really. Is it Wall Street? The federal government? Maybe those huge tech companies? Well, the answer might actually surprise you because, believe it or not, it might just be you. Yep, you. And your friends and your neighbors and pretty much everyone you know. So, how is that even possible? All right, let's dive in and break it all down. Okay, so to really get this, we have to start with one big idea. And that is, in a lot of ways, you are the economy. It really all boils down to this. A consumer is just anyone who buys stuff. Goods, services, whatever. Think about it. From the coffee you grabbed this morning to the phone plan you pay for, every single time you buy something, you're creating demand. And without that demand, the whole system just, well, it wouldn't even exist. Now, look, one person buying a coffee on its own isn't going to shake up the world. But when you pull back and look at what all of us are spending together, the scale of it is just, it's absolutely mind-blowing.
Let's try to put some numbers on this. We'll use 2012 as an example. The gross domestic product, the GDP, which is pretty much the total value of everything produced and sold in the US that year, was a massive $15.7 trillion. Seriously, that's a number so big, it's hard to even picture.
So the big question is, where did all that economic activity come from? Get this, more than 70% of it, that's over $11 trillion, came straight from consumers, people like you and me. I mean, just think about that for a second. Everything that the government and all the businesses in the country spent and invested, combined, was less than half of what everyday people spent. Your choices aren't just some tiny drop in the bucket, they're the actual engine driving the whole thing. And if we zoom in even further, right down to the average household, you can see exactly where our priorities are. Housing, no surprise, is the biggest chunk. But when you start adding in other essentials like transportation and food, it's crystal clear. Our basic, fundamental needs are what keep the wheels of the economy turning day after day. But, the story doesn't end there. We're not just spending the cash that's in our wallets. Our spending power gets a massive boost from the financial system, and it really all comes down to one crucial tool. And that tool, it's credit. At its heart, it's a really simple deal, right? You get something valuable right now, and you just promise to pay the lender back later, usually with a little extra on top. It's the whole buy now, pay later idea that really powers so much of our modern economy. And just how big is this promise we're talking about? Well, back in 2012, there was $2.6 trillion in consumer credit out there in the US. And get this, that number doesn't even count mortgages. It's just an unbelievable amount of spending pulled from the future into today. But here's the flip side. All that debt, it comes with a pretty big risk. Because what happens when that promise to pay back the money can't be kept? Well, that's when we get to bankruptcy. It's basically a formal legal way of saying, I can't pay my debts. It's really the last resort when things get out of control. And let me tell you, the process is no walk in the park. It can mean liquidating almost everything you own to pay off creditors, or you could end up in a really strict repayment plan managed by a court that can last for years. Either way you slice it, it really highlights the serious downside of relying so heavily on credit. So we've got this incredible power as consumers, but we also face some pretty serious risks. And this isn't a new idea. People figured this out a long time ago. In fact, there's this really fascinating history of how consumers started banding together to demand their rights and protect themselves. This whole consumer movement, it goes way back. I'm talking over 100 years ago, with early fights against things like dangerous sweatshops. But it really caught fire in the 1960s. You had President Kennedy giving this huge speech, and then you had activists like Ralph Nader, who, fearlessly went after the entire car industry about safety. It was a huge deal. And at the core of it all were four really simple but powerful rights that JFK talked about. The right to safety, the right to be informed, the right to choose, and the right to be heard. I mean, it sounds basic now, but back then, these ideas were totally revolutionary. It flipped the whole script from buyer beware to a totally new way of thinking, where consumers actually have a right to be treated fairly. All right, so that brings us to today. We know consumers have power, that's for sure. But the kinds of challenges we're up against now, they're always changing. 100 years ago, the big fight was about making sure products didn't, hurt you. But today,
one of our biggest challenges is the sheer consequence of all our buying. I mean, look at this. All these discarded tires, it's a pretty powerful symbol of the incredible amount of waste our economy creates, and that's a huge problem for the environment.
So what's the answer? Well, one of the big ideas out there is something called sustainable consumption. It's really about looking ahead and asking a super important question. How do we get what we need today without messing things up for future generations?
And we're seeing new ways for consumers to flex their muscles to deal with these new problems. A great example is the consumer cooperative. It's basically a business that's owned and run by its own members. It's a cool way to bundle that collective power, not just to get a better deal, but to actually support local communities and build a fairer, more sustainable system from the bottom up.
So, we kind of end up right back where we started, with you. Every choice you make, when you multiply it by millions of other people, literally shapes our economy, our society, and yeah, even our planet. That whole consumer movement fought to give you rights and a voice. The challenges we're facing now, they're demanding that you use them. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you know just how powerful you are, what are you going to do with it?